Hello, Superboy Beyond fans. Welcome back to another one of our patented episode commentaries. We're going to do today a season 2 episode, probably one of the better season 2 episodes.
Yeah, it's funny. This is one of those episodes that I never really hear mentioned as one of the best episodes, but I legitimately really quite like this one, even though it's been a while since I've seen it. But I did, I watched part of it this morning before doing this just to refresh my memory a little bit. I really like this episode.
Yep.
So I think this is going to be a fun one to watch.
So this is going to be Programmed for Death. This is a very Andy-centric episode. So I know most of you out there are saying, "Oh God, not Andy." No, actually, this is a really good one for Andy, because this gives us a little bit of an insight into the character himself and why he is the way he is.
Maybe his best episode. Honestly, I'll just say that now.
Yeah. Actually, I think it is, and parts of The Haunting of Andy McAllister not that bad either.
True. And I've mentioned when we did our first Metallo spotlight, I think Andy's very good in that episode, despite the fact that he's not in it very much. He's also good in Super Menace as well, to be fair. But anyway, should we go on with the commentary?
Yes. So for those of you joining us for the first time, this is not going to be like a typical, reaction video. We're not showing any clips. This is a strict, commentary. So we're going to count you in. Final episode of Disc 1 of Season 2. So we're going to count you in with a 3, 2, 1, and then just hit play. So 3, 2, 1, play.
Yeah, it's funny. I don't know why it's been such a long time since I've seen this episode, because, I always remembered enjoying it. I always thought it's a fun concept as well, just like a robot kind of thing that kills its creator. It's always a fun way to start a story, and I think this is one of the better episodes for it, because let's face it, a robot trying to just deciding to kill people, it very, very quickly could have been just a Terminator ripoff. And I don't think it ever does that.
In season
they already did that, yeah. So, I like this episode quite a bit. I think there's a lot more pitfalls they could have fallen into. Is that even the phrase? I don't know.
And of course, our guest star this week is George Maharis, a very famous actor. I think one of the biggest things he ever did was his role in the 1960s TV series Route 66. But before that, you said he was a singer.
Yeah, apparently he damaged his vocal cords or something, and that's when he moved into acting. But, that's just from skimming his IMDb earlier.
This episode's also written by Cary Bates, another very famous Superman writer, and directed by David Nutter.
And let's face it, David Nutter directed so many episodes of this, and he always does a good job. Even just looking at this scene here, I think just the lighting is, it's very dramatic. And most of the time when they were just in the dormitory, rooms and stuff, usually it was just flat sitcom lighting, wasn't it? It was just very, very bright. Okay, it's at night, but they've obviously put in a little bit more effort with the lighting in this scene, which is good because
and this is one thing that I like. We're getting to see the dorm at night. They don't really ever do many episodes where it's the dorm at nighttime.
No, that's true. Which is why I always picture it with sitcom lighting. But Andy, I tell you what, they dressed him differently this episode. His hair is different this episode. I really do wonder why he looks so different. His hair's very spiky. I don't remember it ever being quite as spiky in other episodes.
Yeah.
But the trench coat works.
Well, that's kind of necessary. I mean, at night in Florida, it does get a little bit colder, so that's probably why you put the jacket on.
But I always like trench coats that sort of go past your knee or whatever. It's always cool. I have owned multiple trench coats over the years.
And now we get our first look at the robot, which that's the only drawback that I have to this episode is the design on the robot.
I quite like it, to be honest. I like how strange it looks. They could have made something that looked a lot more threatening, but I think, considering the fact that this robot obviously wasn't designed to kill people, that's just what it's decided to do later. So, it works for me. Like, in the right lighting, you can imagine that it can be quite a threat, but at the same time, it looks like it isn't what it was designed to be, if that makes sense.
And now we get our first meeting with George Maharis as Jack McAllister. And you got to say something about George Maharis as Jack. He is very charming. So you can kind of see shades of Andy right there.
Yeah, like father, like son. He sees Lana as like, have you ever considered modeling? Like, he's just a. I swear, in Andy's
in his first appearance.
Yeah, that's the first thing Andy said was like, "Have you ever thought about being a model?" Wasn't he trying to make a calendar, like a swimsuit calendar, like the Ladies of Schuster or something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So his father comes along, immediately does the exact same thing. I think it's great. And there's that van just creepily parked.
Yep.
It's well directed, this episode, because let's face it, just showing that the van is there watching is enough. You feel the presence of clearly the villain. I always think Clark is pretty good in this episode as well. He's not quite the Urkel Clark that he is throughout the rest of the season.
He is Urkel Clark here, but he's not,
not to the same extent. Like, he's nerdy, but he's not. I wouldn't say he's Urkel. I would just say he's nerdy.
Yeah, and I mean, he's the one who points out to Lana what Jack meant by, gone away for a couple of years.
Yeah.
He leans over and says, he was in jail.
Yeah.
If he could have played Clark like this for all of season 2, it would have been so much better.
Yeah. And, if they had played it this way, maybe he wouldn't have needed to change in season 3. They could have just continued on this trajectory, And it might have even been fun to have some slightly nerdier aspects of Clark while working for the Bureau. Might explain why Jackson's always getting him to do like the filing and tidying and organising. You might just think, oh, Clark enjoys that stuff, And it would have worked. Yeah, like there's hints of the Urkel Clark here, like the word golly and stuff like that, which, I'll be honest, every time I hear anyone exclaim the word golly, I just have like flashbacks to Back to the Future 3.
Yeah.
I think using the word golly is about the only Urkel moment, really. He's still playing it with a slight nervousness, a slight nerdiness, but yeah. They never quite go over the top in this episode, which they did in many other episodes. I mean, we always point to the bug collection as probably the height of Urkel Clark.
Or the encyclopedia.
Yeah. I forget which episode it was as well. There was one, they were by the pool or something, and Clark's carrying a tray of drinks, and his sandal comes off or something. It's just a nice little comedic sort of slapsticky moment. It's very Urkel Clark, but I think that's one of the occasions where it actually did work quite well. But I do like this sequence. It's a good little Superboy save in a moment.
Yeah, and of course we also just had one of the few, phone booth changes in the entire series.
I do think the season 2 suit looks fantastic in this sequence. Like, it really, we've talked about it before, how like the larger part on the shoulders with the cape, how it makes him look a lot stronger. I think this is one of those sequences where the cape really, it adds so much to the suit. I do prefer the season 3 and 4 cape, just because the season 2 cape, you can tell it's buttoned on most of the time, and I think that does ruin it a little bit. But I like the season 2 suit, and it looks good in this sequence. I think he does a really good job playing both the father and the computer here. Like, yeah, he's playing it completely seriously. There's no
Humor to it at
there's
all.
no humor, no camp. It's just, and yeah, I do get what you mean about the robot not looking quite as good as it could have done, but I still
Then,
like it.
yeah, then
I can't
again,
think of any other robots that look like that, so at least it's somewhat original.
yeah, and then again, we are working on the Superboy series' shoestring budget.
Yeah. And yet it still looks better than the mechanical parts of Metallo. Even the
Yeah,
ones that the military added.
yeah,
If they maybe had, if Metallo, if he'd somehow come across the creator of this robot before he was killed, like, he's the one you want to get to do some updates, clearly. I'd love to know what happened to this thing. I bet it was just dismantled and parts were used for other things, but it's a shame. And I always like that when Superboy lands somewhere and the crowd comes running because they just want to say hello. It's one of the things that I know that John Newton complained about in season 1, that he was doing all these takes off and landings and none of the extras would react to seeing a man fly.
yeah.
Obviously, that's something that changed in season 2.
Who knows? Maybe if they hadn't fired him, maybe that scene would have been one of the things that they said, you know what, John, you're right. Let's give you a few more, quote unquote autograph sessions, meet the fans kind of things.
I think there were a couple of moments like that towards the end of season 1, just because I think he had said it so many times at that point. But I'm trying to remember where I even heard this information. It may have been on the commentaries for season 1, because obviously there were a couple of episodes with them, and I'm pretty sure that's something that he actually talked about in those.
Yeah, I mean, by the time he becomes Superman, then it becomes a little bit more commonplace. People says, "Oh, there's Superman,"
Yeah.
walk away.
But within the first year of this character being publicly known, he probably would have a crowd around him every time he took off and landed somewhere. Because anyone that sees him coming is going to be like, "Oh, there's Superboy,"
Yep.
because it's still new. But yeah, 5 years in, maybe not so much. I imagine it still happens though.
Especially with kids.
Oh, absolutely. Also, just the fact, in our season 5, he moves to Metropolis. It's a new city. People in Metropolis probably haven't seen Superman very often, only on the television or in the paper.
And now we're kind of getting the idea of why the robot is the way he is from Jack. This is a great scene of exposition right here.
Yeah. They give George Maharis a lot of exposition in this episode, and I think in the hands of maybe a less experienced actor, it could have been quite awkward. But he delivers it all so earnestly, and just it's just perfect. It works.
Yeah, and just the interaction between him and Ilan as Andy. I mean, you can feel that they really are like a father and son here.
Yeah, they have absolutely great chemistry. And George Maharis is a good actor to have played that part because I do think they have a very similar face, if that makes sense. You can imagine him actually being the son, but yeah, I think he's great. And this episode would not work anywhere near as well if you didn't have George Maharis in the lead role and the voice of the robot.
Yep. Now we got our scene at the police station with our cop, who later comes back as one of the aliens in Test of Time.
Yeah, which is why we're watching this episode, because you mentioned this on our Test of Time commentary, so here we are.
Yep.
But there is a very good reason, I think, as to why I didn't realise he was in this one, because he does look so different. It's amazing just the difference of hairstyle, and I think didn't they cover over the eyebrows or something in Test of Time?
Yes, and there was like some glossy makeup on his face to make him look somewhat alien.
Mm. Like in that, he looks really strange. Like in this, he just looks like a regular dude. Part of me wants to find another role for him in season 5. Just might be cool to put him in like a superhero role or something. Maybe he could be Guy Gardner. Might be interesting. Since we know he can play both a good character, because he does in this one, and a villain from Test of Time. So I think if he finds a good little middle ground and plays Guy Gardner like he's just genuinely a good person, but kind of a prick, I think it could work. But there's also this scene here. I don't know if we just moved past that line. I may have talked over it, but there's a line where they ask why the robot kills, and he says, like, he's got the mind of a human and he's trapped in a body like that. Wouldn't you go mad? And I think it's... Did we just go past that, or was that later?
I think we just went past it.
Right. It's a really great moment. It harkens back to a friend of mine, actually, one of his favourite sci-fi stories is, I think it's just a short story, but it's called something like I Have No Mouth, Yet I Must Scream, or something like that. It's like a really famous...
Harlan Ellison.
Yeah. It's his absolute favourite story, and he's talked about it so many times. I should probably send him this episode of Superboy and say, like, I think you might appreciate at least one scene in this. And he's a comic book fan, so
Yep.
This episode has quite a few flying shots, which is good, because they do less and less as the show goes on. I think by season 3, there's an awful lot of takeoffs and landings, but no actual shots of him flying, apart from a few occasions. But season 2, they were still doing it.
Now we see why he took the knife from the downed security guard.
Indeed. And it's funny because, Andy occasionally is like written to be kind of an idiot. I'm glad that they didn't do that with the father. Like that thing with the knife shows that he's quite intelligent. He figures, maybe I would need this at some point. I should probably just pick it up just in case. And yeah, I like it. It's little touches
I love how the robot, when he introduces himself to Superboy, he refers to himself as Jack McAllister, the real Jack McAllister.
Mm. Oh. Yeah. There's the moment. I guess we hadn't seen it yet. But, yeah. And I will say this: I realise the visual effects haven't aged super well, but I think they've done pretty well in this episode, considering it's 1989. You know,
Yeah, that's one thing you got to say about the special effects in the show. Yeah, they do look like they're from the 80s, early 90s.
they look like they're from the period that they are, but at the same time, I mean, the white glowy effects on him, I could have maybe done without. But you know, they were working on a very limited budget. You have to forgive some of these things. And let's face it, they make up for it with the wire work when he's flying and stuff. Like that stuff is always perfect. The chroma keying, keying him out. Sometimes there's an outline around him which you can complain about a bit, but most of the time it's pretty damn good. Especially when you consider that this show was edited onto essentially VHS. Granted, it was a broadcast quality VHS, not home media, but Warner Brothers, please remaster this show into HD, because this episode could really do with some of the visual effects just having a slight polish.
Yeah.
Remake them to look like they did, but just remake them in HD. If I ever win the lottery, maybe I'll hire Aaron Price to do the visual effects. I think he'd do a kick-ass job with an episode like this, I love this scene. Best scene in the episode, this. Favorite scene in the episode. The episode's good, but that ending is great.
And it shows that Andy is not a complete dick. I mean, I said this before we started recording. I think this episode kind of explains a lot of why he is the way he is. The get rich quick schemes. Yeah, that's his dad. Right there. That's what he learned when he was growing up. But all the moments where he's acting like a complete jerk, it's a mask to kind of hide the pain that he went through because of his father.
And now we're watching the trailer for Superboy's Deadly Touch. We've done a commentary on that quite recently, but it's a shame because I kind of want to watch it again. I may just watch it this evening for fun. But anyway, so that was season 2, episode 9, Programmed for Death.
Yeah, it has its drawbacks. I mean,
yeah,
which we've talked about, but it really is a great episode. If it had a slightly higher budget for the effects and the robot, it probably would have been just as good, but just looked a little bit better. It needed a little polish on the special effects.
Yeah.
And the reason why it is as good as it is because it's written by Cary Bates.
Yeah, an absolute legend in the comic book world. Really, he always puts in a great script, in my opinion, when he writes for Superboy. Like, how many episodes did he write in total? 4 or 5, something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah, and I don't remember any of them being bad. Maybe I'm wrong. If anybody watching is like, actually, he wrote this episode and it sucks, let us know.
The only episode that I can think of that was actually bad, that was written by a comic book writer, is Mr. and Mrs. Superboy.
Yeah, I still can't hate that episode though. That's the episode where Superboy just went into sitcom territory for me.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily. I can't hate it, you know. But yeah, it's not a good episode.
Although
It's a shame that that's the last time we see Mixie as well in the show.
although
Until
what
few,
what Mixie did to Andy was oh so great.
yeah, so yeah, Mr. and Mrs. Superboy. It's not a good episode, but it has some great moments. How can you hate it? Plus, Richard Keel as is it Bilkerbok is the name?
Milkabach, yeah.
Who doesn't love Richard Keel? You know,
James Bond.
true. Oh, we'll have to find something for Richard Keel in it in season 5 as well. Even though he's already been in the show, maybe he could be Non when we eventually bring in Zod and co. I don't know. I think we already had someone in mind for Non though. I can't remember who we settled on, but I'm sure it will come back to us later.
Yeah, but if we were going to give this a grade, out of 10, I would say it's like an 8.5 to 9.5 range.
Yeah, and obviously, as always, we're grading this per season. This is just an out of 10 score for season 2 itself. We're not saying that this episode is Roads Not Taken level quality, because it's not.
Right.
But compared to the rest of season 2, this is up there. This is definitely one of the better episodes. And it very easily could have just been a Terminator ripoff. They've done it before. It wouldn't have surprised me if they tried again. But they didn't do that. They had a different style story to tell, and there's Superboy saving people. You've got the action, you've got all that stuff, but at the end of the day, it's just a story about a father and son that have been estranged for a number of years coming back together. And when you've got that as the actual basis for the story, I think it's very difficult to mess it up.
Yeah, and what I want to say is, Jack doing what he did, which is what caused the robot to become evil.
Yeah.
Even he starts to realize that my fuck ups are what's causing everything that's happened. I mean, Andy is the way he is because I went to jail. The robot killed the scientist because I did what I did.
Yeah. And, also to work with that, I think this episode shows that Andy is smarter than his father, because when his father's telling him about, I paid the psychiatrist to give me all the best test scores or something like that. And he's like, oh, Jesus, Dad. Did you not think that this was a bad idea? Like, what did you think you were getting yourself into?
And what has Jack said? Well, I needed the money.
Yeah. And doesn't Andy point out, all of this, like all this stuff that keeps happening, like it's your actions that are doing this. Like it's a really interesting basis for the story. The robot plot is almost secondary to just the story of the father and son. And Andy is kind of an idiot at times, but this episode I think shows that, he's at least smarter than his father. So, he can't be that bad. Andy's probably not going to go to prison at some point.
Yeah, and what I have to say is, this, Andy's the act that he puts on, that's just a defense mechanism.
Absolutely.
He doesn't
want front.
Yeah, you realize now that he is the way he is because he's trying to, not deal with his past. His past, losing his mom, his father goes to jail, he ends up living with his great uncle Nate, in that crazy house that we don't get to see until the end of the season. But we can kind of see why he is the way he is. It's all a defense mechanism,
And, Andy had maybe, 2 episodes that were focused around him, this and The Haunting of Andy McAllister. Obviously, he was in practically every episode. I think there are a few that he didn't appear in, but...
Or he was only there for like 5 minutes and then that's it.
Yeah. So, but the fact is, even throughout the entire season, like, it's not a serialized show, but you do get little pieces here and there in almost every episode that just help you to understand who Andy is just a little bit better. And I don't know, I think maybe, we've said so many times that both of us do prefer TJ as the roommate for Clark, but TJ never really got that stuff very much. Like, he had the whole stand-up comedy thing. I think TJ actually got more character development in the tie-in comic. So maybe if TJ had gotten some of this material, maybe he wouldn't have been replaced. I don't know, but it's just one of those things. Like, they replaced so many cast members for season 2. I don't think the new cast members are why the show became more successful with the second season. I think it's all down to the writing. Like, the writing is just better.
Writing and
The directing too.
directing. And I will say this, as much as I like John, Gerard is like, a step above acting wise.
I agree. Yeah, I think
You know?
John would have gotten there. I think if John had not been fired, I think by the end of season 2 he would have been just as good. But it's just one of those things. I think Gerard maybe should have just been the guy that got cast in the first place. Maybe it would have saved a lot of trouble. But at the same time, maybe if they had cast Gerard in the first season, maybe he would have been the one that got fired and replaced. It
Yeah.
might have just been that the Salkinds, whoever was in that role, because I know part of the reason they got rid of John is because they promised him a pay rise for the second season and then wanted to go back on it. If they'd done the same thing with Gerard, maybe the same thing would have happened with him. We all know that whole thing about how John was drag racing on his friend's property and the newspaper got hold of it and all that because he sent an apology to the local sheriff's office or something. We could all see that was just an excuse, really, because we know what the true story behind it all was. I think they were just looking for a reason because they didn't want to pay him more. And they should have paid him more because he almost died doing a couple of stunts in the first season. Like, for the amount of risk that he was taking on, he deserved to be paid.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I do not disagree. And
I imagine Gerard was paid more by season 3 because by season 3 wasn't he like an exec producer as well, and he wrote an episode as well.
I think that didn't happen until season 4, him becoming an executive producer.
They were shot at the same time, though.
Yeah,
I don't know. I thought it was season 3 because I know in a couple of interviews he talks about how season 3 was kind of the turning point for him because he got a bit more control. But I don't know.
Well,
it was just
we all know that by season 3, that's when he said, "You know what? You have to let me make Clark my own."
Yeah. And Clark in season 3 and 4 is one of the better depictions of Clark Kent, I think.
And honestly, I think it's more of a harkening back to what John did in season 1.
Yeah, and he didn't even mean to. That's the thing. And part of me wonders, because I think at one of the Superman celebrations, Gerard said that he watched the George Reeves show when he was a kid. So maybe he was trying to pull a little bit of George Reeves' Clark. Because let's face it, George Reeves played Clark very similar to how people play him today. Tyler Hoechlin's Clark is kind of similar to George Reeves. He's absolutely kind of a dork, but when he needs to, Clark gets stuff done. I mean, season 3 of Superman and Lois, like the diner scene, is just phenomenal.
Yeah, I mean,
he never stops being Clark. He is absolutely Clark Kent in that scene. But he's showing like, no, you struck my son and you threatened my wife. We're gonna have a talk now, and it's just like it's fantastic.
Yeah, and I love how he's still being Clark in the sense that he says, "Let's go outside and do this."
Yeah.
And
do you want to step outside? It's that whole thing. Which Clark Kent and diners are kind of a thing.
Yeah,
it's not just in Superman 2 and that. It's it was also in Man of Steel. There's the diner scene, which I don't like as much, purely because I think it would be very noisy, destroying someone's truck with a load of logs and shit. That would have made such a sound. Even at super speed, it would have sounded like an explosion. There is no way you can do that silently so that when the guy comes outside, he's surprised by it. It's just, if you want to make a realistic depiction of Superman, maybe stick to your own rules. That's all I think.
Yeah.
It's not as stupid as the way they killed Jonathan Kent in that movie, though.
Uh,
Fucking hell. They
don't.
demonstrate in other parts of the film that Kryptonians can move so fast that the human eye can't even see them. So Clark could have run, opened the car door so the dog could get out, and then run back. Nobody in that crowd would even have known that he's moved, and then the dog can just run up.
Yeah.
Jonathan Kent didn't have to die. It was so stupid. Sorry, I'm really getting off topic now with some ranting about
It's okay. It's
a
okay.
version of Super. And let's face it, I think if Henry Cavill's Clark Kent was given a chance to shine, that could have been great, because I don't dislike his Clark. I just think he needed to differentiate the character a little bit more. But I think a lot of that comes down to the directing.
Yeah, and let's just face it. Zack Snyder is not that great of a director. He's not.
It's a shame because Man of Steel sets up so much. Like that end scene where he arrives at the Daily Planet and he's got the glasses on and all of this, and he's like smiling at people and stuff. He looks so dorky, like he's so happy to be there. I'm just like, if he can continue playing Clark vaguely like this, the sequel's probably going to be pretty good. And then it came out and there was none of that. And none of the good Superman scenes either. It was just
the only good scenes that I think are in BVS.
the one outside the Capitol when he's bringing people out.
That,
which Warner Brothers cut from the theatrical cut of the film. Like, that's just ridiculous.
but the good scenes with Clark is Clark doing what he's trained to do, which is be a reporter. He's doing the investigation.
Yeah. And,
and a lot of that got cut too.
Yeah. I mean, same with Lois. Her entire plot in that movie is an investigation, and half of that shit got cut as well. And, let's face it, by the theatrical cut, when that came out, half the movie just didn't make sense because entire scenes had been cut out. They explained what was going on. I mean, it was easy enough to just keep watching because it was, it's not that hard to follow, really. You can fill in the gaps for the most part. But it was just clear that this movie had been butchered. And I thought, you know what, if the director's cut comes out and it's actually an improvement, maybe it will actually be a good film. But
it was, and it wasn't.
It's an improvement, but in nowhere near as much as it needed to be, in my opinion. Like, there's still so many problems with that film.
All that movie is, and I hate to put it like this because it's going to be kind of disgusting, is Zack Snyder doing his masturbation for The Dark Knight Returns. That's all that movie is.
Yeah. Yeah. And, there's also the whole Joseph Campbell and Aaron Rand stuff. He puts his influences everywhere. The Randian stuff is probably more of a problem because I know that's also what the problem was when Steve Ditko was writing Spider-Man back in the day, because he suddenly started adopting all of that philosophy about how it was more selfish to help other people. And it's, I don't know, something about altruism should be about taking care of yourself, and that's it. And it's just like, it kind of goes against the concept of a superhero. It doesn't work.
Kind of goes against the definition of the word altruism.
Yeah. And it's just, it's been a long time since I've read this stuff. I had to write an essay on it when I was at university. And it was the most boring essay I think I've ever had to write because it was just so dull. I've pretty much tried to forget a lot of that stuff, so I'm sure I got elements of that wrong, but there's a really good video. I can't remember what channel made it, but there's a video about why Steve Ditko's work on writing Spider-Man for a while was really strange and not good.
Yeah.
I mean, he co-created the character. He had the right to do that, but it kind of, yeah. And it's why him and Stan Lee fell out, isn't it? So,
well, part of it was that, but a lot of it was the fact that, when it came down to the Green Goblin reveal, Steve was saying, no, we shouldn't make it Norman Osborn. We should just make it somebody we've never met. And there's looking back at the situation, you can see the argument on both sides.
I think it absolutely was right to be Norman Osborn because, especially if you've already got the friendship with Harry going on and all of that stuff, it just brings it all a little bit closer to home for Peter, But
Yeah.
I can kind of see why he would want to just introduce someone new. Because let's face it, back then, that was the time to introduce new characters. They're still using those characters today. There's even, every now and then they'll even introduce a character back then, and, people won't even respond to it at the time. But then, like 20 years later, one of the kids that read that issue and loved it decides, actually, I want to write a story with this character, and suddenly they're back. And it's part of the magic of comic books.
Yeah.
It's happened so many times. Let's face it, the Red Hood wasn't even the Joker in his first appearance, I don't think. Like, there was like a different Red Hood story, and he was like a monk or something, and he was hypnotizing. Like, I think he kidnaps Batman's fiance at one point. And it's like, that was the visual inspiration for the character, and then that evolved into something else and something. And eventually, like, wasn't it like Year One or The Killing Joke or something? And they took elements from a bunch of different Golden Age stories and kind of meshed them together and recontextualized it. And that's how the Red Hood became who he is.
Yeah.
But it was kind of an amalgamation of a couple of different influences at first. I could be wrong on this. If I am, let me know. But that's what I always understood it to be. And I think I've even got in my greatest Batman stories ever told. I'm pretty sure that character is in there. But yeah, Red Hood is a strange one. I could be very wrong on that. If I am, let me know. Maybe I'm confusing him with a different character. But I know there is a character that's somewhat like that.
Yeah, and going back to Superman a little bit. I mean, look at the his original foes from the Golden Age. Like the Ultra Humanite. We have
Ultra Humanite keeps, like, every now and then, like, you hear that name pop back up.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't think it's ever been one of the characters most, like, if you was to ask like the general public to name some Superman villains, I doubt that name would even come up.
Yeah, most of them would say Lex Luthor and General Zod.
Maybe Metallo, maybe Bizarro.
But
that's about it.
The Ultra Humanite,
some of them might even say Nuclear Man, for God's sake.
Yeah. The Ultra Humanite, he was used as an old man in his first appearance. Then he was in a wheelchair because of his fight with Superman, and then he took the body of Dolores Winters, which is really, really, really creepy.
I mean, body snatching stories are always creepy,
And then all of a sudden, he's not seen again for like 20, 30 years. Not until the 70s.
Who was it that actually brought him back? Do you remember? I'm just wondering if it was someone that works on the original thing, or if it was like a new talent comes in.
I think it was a new talent, because one of the first stories to bring him back was either in Justice League or in Superman Family, and they brought the Ultra Humanite back in Dolores Winter's body, and she kidnaps Bruce Wayne at Harvey Kent. That was the actual Earth 2 name of Two-Face, Harvey Kent.
Okay.
It was either at his wedding or it was at Bruce Wayne's wedding to Selena Kyle. She kidnaps Bruce Wayne because she wants her body in her brain in a male body again. And of course, who better to use than Bruce Wayne, because he's the richest man in the world.
Yeah.
And of course, Superman foils the whole thing.
Of course, yeah.
And then later on, it was in the Justice League book when he comes back in the body of the White Ape.
Yeah, I mean, the White Ape version is the one that I usually picture, but it's part of that thing with the Ultra Humanite where it's just, because their appearance has changed so much, it's hard to sort of say what they even look like. Maybe that's part of the reason the character's not as well known, just because there's no iconic image you can point to and say, like, that's the character. Because it's like, no, that's the character for a very specific period of time.
There was another appearance in between the Dolores Winters trying to steal Bruce Wayne's body and then the giant ape. In Superman Family, it's when they introduced the Earth 2 equivalent of the Insect Queen character. He gets the body of a giant ant. I don't even know how they could do that.
I mean, they could do it in film now with with
No, no,
CGI.
no, no. I'm just talking about the brain capacity, the brain's
Yeah, how would that work?
yeah.
I
The
don't,
only
yeah,
way that would work is if he was actually using a device to just transfer his consciousness into the body.
yeah,
And then the white ape body comes around, which
yeah,
is the more iconic version.
yeah. I'm pretty sure. Maybe it was the Ultra Humanite. Maybe it was someone else. But last year, I think it was, they did the Superman Red and Blue miniseries. Just a whole bunch of like anthology stories. I'm pretty sure Ultra Humanite got a mention in one of those, but I could be wrong.
It was actually Superman and the Authority. He actually appears in the issue, and
Right,
he's taken Solomon Grundy's body now.
right. Yeah,
And
I think the Ultra Humanite story in Red and Blue, if I remember right, like Superman has to fight a bunch of other villains, but it turns out it's the Ultra Humanite taking control of each of them one by
it's
one or
it's
something.
it's, it's Superman and the Authority.
I've never read Superman in the Authority though.
Well,
Unless they just reprinted just that part of the story or something, or
or just
maybe that story was like just a different angle on
but
that event or something.
the best part of Superman and the Authority when it comes to the Ultra Humanite is when he's being taken down. He shouts out, "Don't forget, I was your first, not Luthor."
First supervillain. At some point, maybe we'll have to do another. What when we've finished our tie-in comic reviews? Obviously, we're going to go on and start talking about other Superman comics and venture out into the wider Superman mythos. But yeah, I think at some point, Superman Red and Blue will be a fun thing to tackle because I really enjoyed that series. Like, not every story was great, and to be honest, I don't even think the Ultra Humanite story that I'm thinking of, I don't even think it was that good, really. But it was memorable just because that's a villain you don't see that often.
Yeah.
But it's just one of those things. There's so much history behind that character that it's just, even if I'm not a huge fan of the character overall, it's always nice to see them reappear. But
And
anyway,
one thing I got to say about the Humanite, and this will be the
mm,
last thing I say.
yeah, and then we'll sign off because I think that's the end of this episode. And it is so hot
Yeah.
here. I want to go and cool off.
His appearance in the Justice League and Justice League Unlimited cartoons, when they had actor Ian Buchanan doing the voice, Ian Buchanan always plays such great villains. But when he was playing the Humanite, he was actually giving him, pathos. Giving him this little bit of, you say, he's actually quite a charming character. You like him. You know he's a villain. You know he's going to kill somebody, but you love him.
It's the same thing with why we love Michael Callan as Metallo.
Yeah.
I wouldn't call him charming, but he's funny. And there's something likable about how funny he is. And he's a bad guy, like you say. He's killed people. He's probably going to kill again. But when we was watching Super Menace, it felt nice when he briefly was like back on top again, and the first thing he does is he goes gets his babes, and it's just like, yeah, he's got money now. He's going to get his two girlfriends, and you're kind of happy for him because okay, he's kind of a piece of shit, but
Yeah.
I don't know.
And
That it's not going to last, so you're happy that he got at least some of a good time before that happened.
If you recall, when I did Metallo's Blaze of Glory, our season 5 episode, I gave him that moment, where he was actually starting to think back on his stupidity.
Mm.
And then all of a sudden gets the chance to be more powerful. And he says, I'm in.
But that's Metallo. He will always take the opportunity to get more powerful because one, he doesn't want to die, which is a good thing that you introduced in your story. That gave him a load of depth. But two, as well, like he kind of just doesn't want to go to prison for the rest of his life. And he wants to get as much power as he can, just purely so nobody can take him back. And Superboy's the only one that can. which is the only reason I think that he's constantly going up against Superboy. I mean, he's probably still a little bit sore that Superboy's the guy that arrested him in the first episode that he was in, like after robbing the bank. He's
Yeah.
probably still a little bit. He's probably still got a bit of a bee in his bonnet about Superboy because of that. But part of it, I think, is just because he knows until Superboy's out of the way, he could go back to prison any day, really. Yeah. Because let's face it, his robotic parts are made of literal garbage. So,
And I had Lois say exactly that.
yeah. It's literally like even when the military upgraded him in Super Menace, he still looked like he was made out of just whatever they had lying around. It didn't look like there was much thought put into his construction, which is funny because the people that actually designed his costume for the show likely put a lot of thought into that. There probably was a lot.
I would love to see the behind the scenes, like sketchbook of their designs.
Yeah, I would love to see that stuff. I who knows if it even still exists,
Mm. And if it does, I think we know where it probably ended up.
Yeah.
In Chicago.
Probably. He's probably got it. Either that or it's in the Superman Museum somewhere. But
well, that's the other thing. Sam once told me that the Superman Museum, they don't know what they've got there. They've got piles and boxes of stuff, and they don't know what's in it.
Yeah, he told me a story once that he saw one of the Bizarro masks, and they literally had a little card underneath. I don't know if this was the Superman Museum or if this was somewhere else, like an auction or something, but they literally had it listed as Bizarro as seen in Lois and Clark. It's just like that kind of stuff apparently happened a lot. Like stuff is just constantly being miscategorized just purely because a lot of people don't even know that Superboy was a thing. So they see when this came from and they just assume it's from Lois and Clark. Even if anyone that's watched Lois and Clark would know that Bizarro mask never appeared. But somehow mistakes like that still happen. But anyway, thank you all so much for watching. We're going to close this out now because we're just going to keep ranting about the thing. We're definitely going to have to find something else for the guy that played the cop in season 5. Yeah, we'll find something for him. Maybe he'll be a good Guy Gardner. I don't know. But anyway, thank you all so much for watching. Be sure to tune in again next week. Don't know what we'll be doing just yet, but whatever it is, I'm sure it'll be fun. So check us out then. Goodbye.